Ashes by J.C. Jarrett. Chapter 14. Transfer of Power. Rubeus sat in a high-backed chair, his legs crossed with a large tome resting on them. He studied the writings intently, running a finger across the page as he did. The room was lavishly decorated, with shelves of polished books lining the walls. A huge desk of polished crimson hollow wood sat in the middle of the room like a gleaming black idol. Seated at that mincing desk was Alistair de Crystal. He sat turning the gemstone found at the Westlake house over and over in his hands. It sparkled in his hands like a chunk of the night sky. "How is this a crown?" the confused Alistair said again to the wizard. "Not sure, my lord," the wizard said as he continued to read in the tome. "It seems to be incomplete," the wizard finished. "Yes, it is incomplete," a voice rang out from beyond the darkened doorway. "And I think you will be very surprised," the voice of Jander said as the highborn himself entered the room. The pair of Alistair and Rubeus looked up in disbelief at the highborn. His clothes were in tatters and stained in blood. His once perfect face, now ruined with a huge scar running from chin to forehead, bisecting his now empty eye socket. "Well, goodness, Jander, you look like you took a beating," Alistair purred at the highborn. "Westlake took my eye, but he got his in the end, burned alive with his wife." The highborn then began to laugh, making the lord and the wizard somewhat uncomfortable. This was quickly broken by the vision of a circlet, slowly spinning in the highborn's slender hands. Alistair and Rubeus eyed this with an eager gleam. Alistair reached out and took the onyx circlet from Jander. He held it in his hands, feeling the cold black metal. It seemed to pulse, nearly like it had a small heartbeat. His attention was completely on the artifact, never seeing Jander place his hand on the hilt of his new broadsword. Rubeus looked up at the sudden flare or orange light of the fireblade. Before the wizard could react, the blade flashed through the air in a bright flash and whoosh of heat. Alistair looked at the highborn dumbfounded, unsure what had suddenly transpired. He felt nothing, not even the circlet in his hands or the chair he sat upon. The world suddenly tumbled, and he found himself looking across his desk while seeming on his side. How strange he thought this view was, and why he was seeing it. Rubeus jumped, but never let loose a sound as the flame blade cut cleanly through the neck of Alistair de Crystal. The wizard watched as the head set on the neck for a few seconds. Not a drop of blood was spilled, since the flaming blade cauterized the wound instantly. Alistair's head then fell to the desk, coming to rest on its side. He watched the eyes blink once, then set still. Rubeus closed his eyes, waiting for the blow to end his life, but after a few seconds the blow never came. Opening his eyes, he found Alistair's now headless body on the floor, and Jander seated at the black desk, turning the gemstone over in his hands. "Get out," the highborn said, never looking up from the stone. Alone, the wizard sat in his chambers, in the large manor that belonged to the late Alistair de Crystal. High up on the third floor, nearly isolated from the rest of the home, Rubeus contemplated recent happenings. Westlake's dead, Alistair dead, the crown in the hands of Jander, who does not seem to be in complete control of himself. The wizard thought of all these things, and what he could do. The idea of killing Jander had crossed his mind several times, but he was not sure he could survive the encounter. And that was his biggest concern. His next idea was to get as far away as he could, but was not sure if the highborn would allow him this. He could just run, but he was sure the highborn would hunt him down, and he knew how deadly Jander was. Being deep in thought, he jumped in start when his door banged open violently. Shambling into the room was the headless body of Alistair. Gripped in its left hand was its own severed head, held by the hair as if a lantern. Rubeus was preparing to throw a spell at the undead thing, but quickly let that idea go when Jander entered the room. The contrast between the highborn he left downstairs and the one before him was night and day. When he had last seen him, Jander was bloodied, clothes tattered and torn, and filthy from battle and the hard road he had been upon. The man in front of him now seemed taller. Gone was the rags he had worn, having replaced them with Alistair's own armor. The armor was black plates of Taline steel, with elegant designs etched into their surface. On his back was a long flowing black cape, and his flaming broadsword on his hip. The most striking difference was his once empty eye socket was now filled. The highborn had forced the glittering gemstone from the crown of the dead into the socket, giving him the look of an eye that was full of stars. Finally rested upon his forehead was the black onyx circlet. Now, Alistair," the highborn said jovially. "Calm yourself. That is no way to act in this fine wizard's home." He finished with an evil grin on his face. Rubeus stood silent, unsure of what was about to happen. He looked at the animated body of Alistair, and knew that the soul of the man was trapped in there in what could only be a personal hell. Though there was no love lost with the death of Alistair de Crystal, he still would not wish that fate on another. "Is Alistair not much more agreeable this way, dear Rubeus?" Rubeus looked once more at the now undead thing and nodded just to appease the highborn. He was almost afraid to speak with the unstable Jander in fear of being in this close quarters to him he would not survive combat. "I am going to send you on an important task. I want you to find Westlake's daughter and her companions and kill them. I fear they could be more trouble than expected," Jander said to the wizard in a voice that demanded, not asked. The wizard's sharp mind rolled through his choices. He could hunt down the daughter and whoever else is with her and kill them, or he could say he was and run away. "Where should I begin?" Rubeus finally spoke aloud, his voice sounding odd now in the room. "I'm going to send you and a few men to the Rusty Spigot to watch for them there." Jander then smiled and, in combination with his new eye, looked to be pure evil. "Then set on them outside the inn. Leave their bodies in the wild for the carrion," the highborn finished. "Jander," the wizard said to ask a question but was quickly corrected. "Lord Jander," the highborn bellowed. "My lord," the wizard quickly spoke to try to calm Jander. "I will go to find us a real wizard. I am going to find Mordenvex." "You will leave in the morning," the angered highborn said to the rat-faced man, knowing it was an insult to the wizard. He then turned and walked from the room, leaving the wizard alone with his thoughts. The next morning, Rubeus exited the manor to find 3 horses outside, with 2 armored men with full helms standing ready. The wizard looked at the men at first. He paid no attention. Then, as he placed his saddlebags upon his horse, he looked back at the pair of armored warriors. They stood motionless, neither uttering a word. The wizard watched them for several minutes. His mind screamed at him, saying that the mercenaries acted odd. As he climbed onto his horse, the warriors followed suit, and then immediately began to travel along the trail from the manor to the main road. Rubeus was not yet sure, but believed that the warriors with him may be alive still. He feared that the men may have been killed, then raised by Jander, now being under his control. The wizard thought of what he may need to do, his fear that Jander would end him as soon as the Westlake girl was out of the picture. With the power of the crown of the dead, he may as well be out here with 2 Janders. Finally, Rubeus settled on an action. The wizard slowly pulled his reins, causing his horse's pace to drop behind the others. Dropping the reins, he began to independently draw arcing runes of energy in the air. The left hand mirrored the right. As he finished, he scoops up all the energy in both hands, pointing his index fingers to the backs of each of the warriors in front of the wizard. A great crack of thunder echoed across the hills, as bolts of lightning erupted from his fingertips and arced into the middle of the backs of the mercenaries. Energy burst from the chests of the warriors. They never let loose a sound or cry of pain. After the lightning bolts ceased, their bodies dropped from the horses to the ground, causing the horses to trot another few feet, then stop. Rubeus dropped down off his horse and walked to the bodies. With a foot he kicked open one of the helms. Just as the wizard had feared, the pale skin with bulging veins and yellow eyes of a zombie looked back at him, though now destroyed by the wizard's spell. Rubeus knew that Jander with the crown would feel the loss of these 2, and would send more after him. It took the wizard almost no time to decide on his next action. He just hoped he would survive it as well.